There actually are different parts of burnout. Sometimes we feel great physically, but emotionally and mentally, we're so drained, we're so done. It's sort of like if you show up to work and you're physically there, but mentally you're checked out. That's a sign of burnout as well, or vice versa. Sometimes our bodies are so drained and tired. Sometimes your mind is still going and you have all these ideas. Or it could be a combination of those things. There is a mind-body connection. So a lot of times, which is the sneaky part of burnout, even though we might feel great mentally, but physically our body is sending us a sign to take a break. We need to be taking those breaks because over time, when you're chronically physically fatigued, that does affect your mental space and vice versa. So you get to the point where you're just so mentally drained, it will start to have physical impacts in your body.
Hello and welcome back to the Connected Mindset Live. I'm your host, Greg Tomczyk, where each week we connect you to the stories and strategies that are going to help you take the next step. Sometimes that's really the hardest step to take, as most of us know. And what you're going to hear about today is really a topic that's been very important to me throughout my career. As most of you know, in 2016, I was the victim of a cyber attack in my first company. And when that happened to me, I knew that I was going to build a team of experts who I could have called in that situation. I've done that with Valor Cybersecurity, rapidly growing team in the cybersecurity space. But as I went through that journey to get where I am today, I was able to work with many of the top companies' cybersecurity teams as an advisor. And I realized that many of them were so burnt out, but they didn't have the word for it. Most of the time in cybersecurity, you need to be available 24/7 or around the clock to be able to respond to these incidents, events in real time because they have drastic impact. And burnout impacts everybody's ability to actually respond in a timely manner. And that's what we're going to talk about today with Dr. Nekeshia Hammond. Dr. Hammond, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. Looking forward to diving in here. One of the ways we like to start the show to give the audience a little perspective into your story and your background and the impact that you're making on the world is, what mission are you on and what are you hoping each person listening in today walks away with?
Sure. So it's definitely a mission. I would agree with you. But the mission that I'm on right now is to really work on helping people to prevent burnout, helping people to understand their mental health and their wellness, and that they can make themselves their number one priority. I know for myself personally, I still remember years back when I personally hit burnout and how there was just this mindset that I used to have of this go, go, go mentality, not taking a break, as many breaks as I needed to, which of course affects your productivity. But really not really understanding the value of making myself my number one priority and making sure that physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, that I was where I needed to be to fulfill all the roles that I had to play. So now that I understand that better and understand that better professionally and personally, then I'm on a mission to make sure that I educate others to understand how that all works and how we can live more fulfilling roles and be more happy and more productive in the roles that we play.
Absolutely. I love that mission. That's something that I think everybody can relate to. They may be going through it, but not know it because they haven't really been able to contextualize, what burnout is and how it holds them back. I know how deeply it impacts people, teams, communities, organizations, people when they come together. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was kind of, how'd you get to that point of, I'm burnt out, I know what this is and feels like, and then use your superpowers, in your doctor side and your psychologist side to kind of bring those two worlds together.
Yeah. So really, for me personally, it came down to, and this is a part of what burnout can be. Burnout looks different depending on who we are, but there was just a point where I was so physically exhausted. I was so mentally, I should say, and physically exhausted, working a lot of hours. Just had a young, at the time, my son was about 3 or 4 at the time. So young child, just started practice, got married a couple years before that. Like there was so much going on. I was trying to do this whole like super mom, super wife, super business owner, like doing so much, but there's nothing wrong with us having a lot of roles. But the problem was I wasn't taking the time to take care of myself. So what that led to was that exhaustion, which is a part of burnout. I was choosing, highly don't recommend, but at the time I was choosing to get little amounts of sleep, like 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep a night, because at that time it made sense to me to go hard, hustle hard, and all these philosophies that I had. The problem with that, though, is that when you hit that burnout and your body is just so physically exhausted and your brain is so physically exhausted, you get to a point where you don't feel like you can go anymore. And it's actually counterproductive because then you can't be productive in the things that you wanted to be productive in. So that can be a cycle for a lot of people if we don't, like you said, start to recognize that, start to address that. So now, fast forward, one of my non negotiables for my own self care is sleep. Ironically now, right? Like I make it a mission the majority of the nights to get 7 hours of sleep or more because I know how beneficial sleep is for my body. And that's just one example. But to your point, it does take a moment for us to be more self-aware and then put the tools into place so that we're not continuing to hit burnout.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. I think it's one of those things that people have a hard time contextualizing, but when they get to burnout, I know for me, when I've burnt out in my past, I lose that ability to like feel, those things that would give me the sign of burnout because it's like my system's so overdriven, mentally and physically that I'm at a point where I don't feel like the emotions or the feelings that come up that say you need to slow down. So it's like, it's kind of like pushing them down. That's at the end of the day, kind of what people describe as depression, where you're kind of pushing everything down that you need to release into the world or kind of get off your chest or work through a problem that's hanging over your head that's making you feel exhausted. And I think that really impacts your mind and your body. I think a lot of people in the audience think about burnout either physically or mentally. Do you think about it as those two coming together, or are there different types of burnout, whether it's mental or physical?
Yeah, great question. And that's the sneaky part of burnout. There actually are different parts of burnout. So I know we were talking before we started this program, Greg, that sometimes we feel great physically, but emotionally and mentally we're so drained, we're so done. It's sort of like if you show up to work and you're physically there, but mentally you're checked out. That's a sign of burnout as well, or vice versa. Sometimes our bodies are so drained and tired. Like sometimes your body's like, I need a break, like I need a nap, or I need to sit down or lay down or something like that. Like your body is so drained, but sometimes your mind is still going and you have all these ideas. So, or it could be a combination of those things, but it's really important. There is a mind body connection. So a lot of times, which is the sneaky part of burnout, even though we might feel great mentally, but physically our body is setting us a sign to take a break. We need to be taking those breaks because over time, when you're chronically physically fatigued, that does affect your mental space and vice versa. So you get to the point where you're just so mentally drained, it will start to have physical impacts in your body. It can affect your blood pressure, your blood sugar. It can, cause inflammation in your body. Like there's a lot of things that happen. So there really is this mind body conversation, if you will, going on. But when we don't stop to think about those things, that's when it has more severe consequences. But you're absolutely right. There's different types of burnout depending on who we are and how it affects us.
Yeah. Yeah, that really helps the understanding of kind of making sense of burnout. When you see either patients or when you went through it yourself, and I think that's what makes it the mission you're on. It makes it so valuable because when we go through something, then we're qualified to serve that past version of ourselves. And I think you've done that over time and probably reached burnout in helping other people prevent burnout, right? So it's kind of interesting how that works. But what kind of signs have you seen or experienced that people should be looking for? Because I know when your body's extremely inflamed and you're stressed out and you don't feel like doing anything healthy, then it's kind of like a downward spiral, that sometimes we don't feel we're on that spiral, on that roller coaster, until you get that blow up moment, or rock bottom, as some people call it, or
Yeah.
whatever that state is. So, have there been any kind of common or most frequent signs that people should
Yeah.
look for when it comes to a time frame of, I need to reset, or I need to take a pause?
Yeah, and I'm hopeful that, and to answer your question, yes, there's a lot of warning signs to think about. And I'm also hopeful, though, to your point, that we hopefully work more on not getting to the point where we've spiraled so far down. I mean, now we're in like major crisis, because if we sort of take that reset, recharge when we're having earlier warning signs, then
Mhm.
that can be more helpful. So when you it could be, again, physically, mentally, or a combination of those things, but the fatigue that you feel, the lack of motivation that you feel, like the stress level, we all feel stress in different ways. So for some of us it's physically headaches, backaches, stomach aches, like all sorts of aches, not medically related but more stress related. Those things, are signs. Sometimes burnout gets so bad it leads to more depression and anxiety. So now you're talking about bad moods, problems eating, problems sleeping. Like there's a
Mhm.
lot of different warning signs, but the most important thing is when we get, and this is something I teach in my new book, but when we get into practices where we're taking care of ourselves regardless, my hope is that we don't wait until we hit burnout to start taking care of ourselves, but we make it a mission for ourselves, because we deserve to be emotionally healthy and happy. We make it a mission to have daily practices where we're working on being physically healthy and emotionally, spiritually, and mentally healthy, so that we don't have to worry about hitting burnout to begin with.
Yeah, yeah, it's more of the proactive versus reactive approach. And
Yeah.
what have you seen in the people that prevent burnout but are the busy, or like they have the most things
Hmm.
going on? What have you seen them do as kind of common threads?
Yeah.
Obviously the self-care practices are critically important,
Hmm.
making choices and saying no to certain things. But has there been anything else you've seen them do? Because most people are kind of on either side. Like, they get stressed and they run away from everything, and they don't want to do anything. And then there's others that
Yeah.
thrive in that environment. And those are typically the people that are running a business, and they have kids, and they're in that family, leadership role. And
Yeah.
it's a lot to juggle for anybody. So, any commonalities that you've seen in those people who have kind of found a way to thrive through
Yeah.
the burnout, or work through it?
Yeah. Yeah, the biggest thing I've seen that has worked for people, with even like some of the corporations lately that I've been working with, or addressing the issue, of course, of burnout prevention, is this idea of mindfulness. Because I just did a talk recently with a company who was basically saying, listen, we are working like 60 hours a week and that sort of thing. That's just, it is what it is, right, for their environment. And it's not that necessarily always have to work less hours, although of course I would lessen our stress level, but it's how do you, in a 60-hour week, let's say, like how do you still manage yourself? How do you still manage your mindset? So what was working with some of those people in that group was mindfulness practices, meaning how do you I call it take a minute. That's something I highly advise to a lot of us, but how do you take the time to live in the present moment, where whatever you need to do with that 160 seconds of your day, whether it's taking some deep breaths, if you believe in prayer, if you need to take a walk outside, like how do you reset and recharge and make that a part of your daily practice? Because again, 60 hours, it's a lot, right? But depending on, whatever our workload is, it's still possible. There's still people who are thriving, working a lot of hours, juggling a lot of things, and they're doing well because they put those practices into place. So mindfulness has definitely been a common thread that I've seen. And then the other part has been, which I would also recommend to people, is thinking of this as having so a good support system wherever that support system lies, because you don't have to do this by yourself. So if that is your place of work, who is really great for your wellness in corporate or business or wherever it is that you may be working, if that's your family group, your friend group, if there's a place of worship, wherever it is for you, you have this great support system who can help you get through the dark and hard times, that is also helpful for burnout prevention as well. So those are the two, I mean, there's many, but those are the two most common themes that I've seen that work for people who are like, I'm busy, but I still want to thrive. And how do I do this all? It's your mindset, it's the mindfulness, and it's the support system that you have.
Yeah. Yeah, the support system's so critical, and I think the support system helps you reinforce the practices that you want
Yeah,
to have because a lot of these companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, these companies that have made offices with nap pods and ping pong tables and things of that nature, they get criticized a lot. But when you think about the psychology of it and just somebody playing a quick ping pong game, if they're
I love it.
working a long sprint, it's like
I
let's
love that.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's incredible for the mind, and they've kind of
yeah,
figured that side of it out. If they want people to be there and be working in person, and I know people are
yes.
transitioning back into offices now, so I'm sure there's a
Hmm.
lot of companies out there thinking about how do we bring people back and prevent burnout that we now know probably before like COVID and that time of moving away didn't really
Yep.
exist, but now we've kind of been able to contextualize it. The conversation starting with experts like yourself, putting the information out there, and now companies are kind of asking, how do we transition back to what was normal, but learn those lessons from what we've learned and kind of go back better and have those kind of burnout prevention programs or what do they call those programs at like a big
Like
company?
employee wellness programs. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, yes, depending on the company, there's a lot of different variations. But to
Yeah.
your point, I mean, it seems so simple sometimes, but having spaces, again, depending on the size of the company, but having spaces, wellness spaces, Zen spaces, people can take a break. People can play ping pong if you need to. If you have a calming space, like those things really go far. It's just one step.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that need to be put in place, but those things really go far. And it does show the employee, you know what, we care about you, we value you, we care about your wellness, we allow you to reset and recharge here, especially in, again, work-life balance and all the things that we're all juggling right now. I mean, we just had Hurricane Milton where I'm at. I mean, it's a lot. There's a lot happening. I mean, things happen. It doesn't have to be a hurricane, obviously, but there's just a lot that we're managing in our lives. So it's important, I think, for different corporations and businesses to say, "Hey, like we're supporting you, and here's what we're doing about it."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we spend more time at work most of the time than we do at home or anywhere
Yeah,
else. So
yeah,
might as well have that as a support system or be that leader that can support the people around you. I think that's critically important.
yeah.
One of the topics I wanted to discuss is I think a lot of people struggle in their own mind, like to figure out like what's going on. I know your background's in psychology and all the great things you've learned about kind of that mind body connection. And what do you see people in your practice struggle with most mentally? And then, what can somebody listening in today kind of learn from those struggles? Because I think the more we do, or like the bigger mission we're on, those struggles hit us more because we're, trying to do something that has obstacles. And a lot of people that listen into this show are business owners and they're trying to figure out themselves while trying to also figure out their business. So curious
Yeah.
what you've learned people struggle with most in today's world and kind of what everybody that's listening in today can kind of start to do if they don't have that implemented in their own life.
Yeah. One of the biggest struggles I've seen is anxiety. And it's extremely common, by the way. So if anyone's listening to this and is like, I feel like I'm alone, being anxious or having negative thoughts, I promise you, you're not alone. There's millions and millions of people who struggle with anxiety. And so one of the things that's really important and something that I suggest for people to think about adding in when you're like, I need to work on my self-awareness or I need to work on my own thinking, is to ask yourself three questions often, preferably once a week. So the first question is asking yourself, how am I doing? Because we don't check in with ourselves enough. There's a lot happening, like I said, with our family, with our friends. There's a lot happening. We can get overwhelmed very easily. So we need to be checking in with ourselves. The second question is, what do I need emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically? because what you need today is not necessarily what you needed years back or what you'll need years from now. We're all going through different seasons, but what is it that you really need in those four areas? And then the third question to ask yourself is, what step can I take today to improve my life? And it can be a baby step. Those count too.
Mhm.
And it
Yeah.
actually, the baby steps, the simple things that we add in sometimes for our own wellness can go really far. And I could talk more about that later, but those are three questions that I would recommend if we, especially when it comes to anxiety, if we really took the time to stop and work on our self-awareness. There's a lot we can do actually with our own negative thinking to work on getting to a healthier place in our own minds. Like you said, our own minds can, really be difficult.
Yeah.
We have our own mental battles sometimes.
Mhm.
But when you work on that first step, then you start to see the progress that you need to see. And sometimes you can do this on your own, and sometimes you need the help of a mental health professional, which is totally fine, right? Or you need the help of a friend or an accountability partner, or whomever it is, which is fine. But we have to start taking those steps if we're gonna be addressing certain things, and we're working towards being healthier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. How am I doing? Um, what what next step can I take, and where do
Yeah,
I
and
need
what
to
do I
improve?
yeah, and what do I need physically, emotionally,
What
spiritually,
do I need?
mentally?
Yeah. What do I need?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish more people would ask that to the people they care about, right? It's because we try to, sometimes, most of the time we don't ask that to ourselves. And,
Yeah.
most of the time people ask, how are you doing? But it may never get to, what do you need, or what next step can you take, or how can I help you take? And
Yeah.
if we had more
Yeah.
conversations like that, I think it would help everybody kind of have more clarity going forward. And I think a lot of times when we don't ask those questions, we just kind of feel how we're doing, and most of the time that feeling is probably bad if we're not taking inventory of, what do we actually need to improve that, or
Yeah.
maintain that. And I think that's a critical aspect to preventing burnout ultimately. um,
And sometimes the reason why it's important to understand what you need
mhm.
is because we're I feel like, so I play a lot of different roles, but as a psychologist, when I'm in my office and doing psychological evaluations, for example, what's interesting is and as a society, sometimes we're jumping to like, how can we help ourselves? But we don't really know what the needs are first. So when I think of like psychological testing and I'm looking at, okay, what is this person's IQ and how are they doing emotionally, and what's their personality, and are they dealing with depression or anxiety or ADHD, or what is going on, then we can get to the next step, which is like, okay, how do we treat this, or how do we help this? But a lot of times we skip that step and go straight to like, what do I need to do? And it's like, wait, what,
Yeah,
what let's stop with and first think of like, what is going on with us, like where are we at, right? I mean, we may be in a great place. Like the answer might be like, I'm doing great this week, which is great. Or the answer might be like, I'm really overwhelmed and I'm on the verge of burnout this week. Like, where are we at? And then what do you need? So that, and we start to chip away at this. Like, I don't want it to sound overwhelming to people. We may be like, we need like 50 things, right? But like, when you start small and like start to chip away at some of the things that you need, maybe it's a therapist that you need, or maybe it's, more support from your friends, wherever it is, like just taking those baby steps sometimes, and then you start to see the positive changes happen.
absolutely. Yeah, one of the things I've learned over the past probably year in communication is trying to not assume that somebody needs, something when they say, like, kind of asking what are they actually saying,
Yeah.
and then not trying to rush to an immediate solution, because I was that person that would try to solve, because all day I was solving things like for my business,
Yeah.
and trying to get the next step from an athlete standpoint, and it felt like solve. So from a communication relationship standpoint, and we've had a few experts on that have talked about this topic. It would be like an immediate solve, and it would never be what do you actually need, or asking
Yes.
yourself what are you hearing and what do you think that they need, and not assume that they need it, but ask them, what do you
Yeah.
actually need to feel better about this situation, or what should I have done different, or things of that nature.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Completely agree. A really good question to ask someone going through whatever they're going through, a crisis or whatnot, is how can I support you?
Yeah.
right? Because we need support in different ways. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's excellent. As far as taking action, I think burnout holds a lot of people back from taking some people call it taking the aligned action or taking the authentic action for them. I think burnout or symptoms of burnout hold people back from taking that action to make or create the change they want to see in the world around them or within themselves. Um, what have you seen from kind of lessons for taking action? Obviously, there's practices to prevent burnout, but when you've taken action to start your practice and to put this message out, to go on stages, have you learned anything that's helped you kind of take aligned action and kind of what you wanted, but then actually bring that into the world?
Yeah, for sure. So it definitely starts with mindset.
Yeah,
But so it definitely starts with mindset for sure. But also, I will say for myself personally that it's also surrounding yourself. I know this is very cliche to say, but it's really about surrounding yourself too with people who are aligned, with people who inspire you, with people who uplift you. Like I can think of some of the communities I'm in right now who are like they're just the most amazing people. And when you surround yourself with that, not only do you know that whatever you want to achieve is possible, but you just have that positivity around you, which is really, really important. Like it just it can really elevate your mindset when the people around you are like, I got you, like I got your back, keep going, like, because it's hard as an entrepreneur, business owner, corporate, like wherever you're at, like it's hard to juggle a lot of things. But when again, surrounding yourself, like who are you surrounding with? Are you, and maybe it is or isn't in your workplace, but there's plenty of communities out there, positive communities out there who want to support you on whatever mission that you're on. So I'm also a big advocate of, the proper coaches, the proper mentors, the proper communities who are going to support you through what you're trying to achieve.
yeah, I love that. We definitely had to go through that as young athletes. Community,
Yeah.
especially in the minor leagues. I mean,
Yeah.
you're wrapped into this community of support from the
Yeah.
beginning. And if we didn't have that, I don't know how we would have survived ultimately. But
Yeah.
really
Yes.
had the place to go or the people to be around us to kind of keep us together when the 180 game season or 100 game season was in full speed, and you're like three-fourths of the way through, and you're like,
Yeah.
I can't even think about the strategy that at the beginning of the season was so easy to think about, and my body's breaking down, people are getting injured around me, and it's like a
Yeah.
whirlwind. And without that community, so I think they help us kind of slow down. I think that's what my community's really done for me in certain
Yeah.
ways, is like slow the process down, be able to zoom out a little bit,
Hmm.
take a pause and say, what do you really want and what do you need to get there, and just be able to ask those questions that you mentioned. And it's helped me to achieve things I wanted to achieve, maybe not in the exact time frame, but if I was trying to speed up, I probably would have crashed into something or proverbially went off the tracks to some extent, because I
Yeah.
was moving too fast. So
Yeah. And a lot of times when you're actually in burnout, sometimes to your point, you don't, because you're in it, you don't see and understand like how it's affecting you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Like you don't always understand that. But when you have other great people around you who are like, hey, like those accountability people, like that makes a difference. And that's important.
oop. Yeah, thanks for the comment, Ashley. I appreciate you mentioning, and she mentioned she's experiencing burnout right now. I know she's not the only one.
Hmm.
We've definitely all been there, so you're not alone, and hopefully you get a lot of key takeaways. If you guys want to ask any questions, you can definitely put them in the chat. Otherwise, definitely want everybody to go check out Dr. Hammond's new book, Mindset Training: Conquer Your Mind, and the rest will follow. Any key points from that book that we haven't discussed that you feel the audience listening in today needs to hear?
Yeah, I would definitely. So the book is, well, about what we're talking about, of course, but really when I think of self-care, because especially my own journey of self-care growing up and not I don't think I heard the term self-care necessarily growing up, and having to understand what that all means. Like the book is really about holistic self-care because sometimes too we hear this buzz term self-care and we think of it as one area only in our life, but we're complex humans, and we have other parts of us going on which does affect our work, does affect our family life, does affect who we are to people. So it's really divided up into strategies, like practical strategies, physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. Like here's some tips, like here's some things to do. Because a lot of questions that I've gotten over my time of being in the mental health field is like where do I start? What do I do? So I tried to think about all those questions that many people have asked me and put it in this book, if you will. But essentially it's taking that first step, even if it's a baby step. And again, retraining your brain to work on having a better mindset. It's a very different life to have a mindset of I'm putting my self-care into place, still living maybe, right? Hecticness and all those sorts of things, but I'm putting the self-care into place so I'm not crashing and burning.
Yeah. Do you have any other exercises in that book other than the three questions you mentioned? Do you have tools that people can use to kind of bring it into reality? I know for me, I'm a big writer, so like I'll write, kind of not every thought, but you know what I mean? From a mapping out my mind, I can put it on paper, and I'm a visual learner, so I can kind of learn how to work through things through writing it down.
Yeah.
And those question exercises have been big for me. I know it's not for everybody to kind of journal or write things down and kind of answer big questions daily or weekly to kind of inventory things. They can do it in their own mind, but are there any other kind of those tools in the
Yeah.
book that people can look forward to?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things is about your thought process. So understanding a lot of us, I think the research shows we have like thousands and thousands of thoughts a day. Most of them are negative, but how do you work on addressing those types of thoughts so they can be more positive and have a more positive effect on you? One of the ways to do this is I'm not saying it's the easiest thing to do, but it takes a little bit of time. But you start tracking your thoughts, and there's so many things out there right now. I mean, you can literally start by writing it, on paper and just tracking the most common thought that is negative for you. Because a lot of us have a theme in our thinking, whether it's I'm not good enough or I'm not this enough or I'm not that enough or I'm not where I want to be, like whatever it is, that's just this common theme. So you work on keeping track of that and then you work on replacing those thoughts. I don't want to simplify this though. It does take a lot for us to change our mindset. You can try this on your own, and sometimes it works beautifully, or sometimes you do need the help of a life coach or mental health professional to work on retraining your brain and to recognize those negative thoughts and then replace them with more positive thoughts so that you're not spiraling down into depression or anxiety or whatever it is that all the negative thoughts can lead to for you. But that's just one example of an exercise. There's many in there, but that's one of my favorites. And then also just a reminder, I talk in the book too about how I changed my morning routine because what I used to do, highly not recommended, but I used to years ago wake like as soon as I woke up in the morning, I was on my cell phone. Like I
Mhm.
was on my cell phone checking the last email, making like it was something work related. Like as soon as I woke up, which is a horrible way to start your day. So now I do not touch my phone until I've done my gratitude practice, my devotional, spend time in prayer, deep breathing. Then I get to my phone. But doing that has been life changing, honestly, and a lot more helpful for my mental health. And so it doesn't have to be that, of course, but just something of how are you starting your day in a calming way, besides just getting up and going as soon as you wake up. Like those are just, again, little things that you can do that can really work on helping you physically and mentally when it comes to your growth and your mindset.
Yeah, I know for me, the way I feel physically is almost a direct correlation to how I feel mentally.
Yeah.
So for me, I basically started to wake up, walk outside, and then like 3 to 5 minutes after being out there, like do 50 jumping jacks or just kind of get my body moving because that's a big thing that makes my mental health more clear when I feel like my heart has gotten elevated and I've been able to kind of move around a little bit, but have that slowness and ease into it of getting some fresh air and being able to be
Yes.
outside. I think there's something to that for me at least when I see
Always.
when I see nature and outside.
Yes.
It like kind of grounds me in a way that I know when I don't get that, I can feel the difference, and it's
Yeah.
pretty drastic. So
There's so many benefits of being in nature. I'm a big nature person too.
yeah,
There's so many and you don't have to be out there. I mean, we don't have to spend. I mean, it would be great. We can
yeah,
spend hours and hours in nature, but like it's just the little things sometimes like that really makes a difference.
it really
Spending
is.
small amounts of time in nature, it does, and there's research on it too. So
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Well, this has been an excellent conversation to kind of dive into burnout, dive into well-being,
yeah,
dive into some of that mindset training I think that we all need. I think most of us, as you mentioned, do have negative thoughts, and being able to share those and not just hold them in, because sometimes we can't solve them
yeah,
internally. We got to kind of go external to seek an answer, but we have to know the questions to ask. I think that's critical. For me, I tried to solve a lot of things internally because that's how it was as an athlete. But what I realized is what empowered me to move through those most difficult times was I had other players that were going through the same thing with me. And
exactly.
that,
Yep.
that those are some of the benefits I've seen from life coaches or talk therapists or people that can kind of see and lay out the blueprint of what you're saying. And I call them threads or themes. You call them
Yeah.
themes, but just threads in your thought process to be able to say, to kind of ask the right questions around where you could potentially improve. So I think that's definitely something I've seen benefits from. I know a lot of our listeners have, since listening to the show, have kind of sought out somebody like your practice, or going to a local therapist or a life coach, and starting to have those types of conversations, because it drastically changes the way that you think, because you're intentionally and consciously kind of shaping it, as opposed to the world shaping it for you, which is oftentimes what we let happen. One of the ways we like to wrap up the show, Dr. Hammond, is what is connection? Because this show is all about connection, the connected mindset, and how do we better connect with the world around us? What does connection, mean to you, whether it's in your practice, personal life, or kind of how you live today and where you're headed? How big and what does connection really mean to you, joining us today?
Yeah, I love that question, by the way. Connection is everything, honestly. What's interesting, so this is year 15 for me in the mental health field as a psychologist, and I cannot even express in words how powerful the human connection is. It has such profound impact for us. It's so important for us to be connected to one another. It's so critically important to be surrounded by positive people in your life. So to me, connection is about, again, I think about just so many amazing groups that I'm a part of right now. Like so many like-minded people who are trying to change the world. Those are my people. I love them. Like trying to change the world, trying to have positive impact, trying to help other people. Like it's amazing, like to be around that. So that, like, how do we be connected? I'm excited of what I'm doing, but at the same time, it's so much bigger than me.
Yeah.
But how can you be connected with other people who are also going to help you on this mission of helping others? Like that, to me, is what connection is about.
Mm-hmm. That's a life well lived, in my opinion, when you can look back and think
Yeah.
about I think they say it's like 7 seconds, or it's something when we kind of go to the next life, or whatever you believe about, when we kind of move on to another life. A lot of people say we have 7 seconds of kind of visions that come to us, and most of the time those are experiences, people, great things you did with people around you, and the love and care that you had for them, and or have for them. And I think that's so important to think about, that life's short, and if we can do just the right practices, surround ourselves with the right support system, it can help us prevent a lot of the things that can hold us back from having those ultimate, experiences at the end of the day. So I think that's so important. The work that you do is so impactful, Dr. Hammond. Really appreciate everything you do for the world. It's something we all need access to. We all need the ability to reach out when we need help, and they can reach for your new book, or the books you've published in the past. And I know a lot of your work's out there at drnekeshiahammond.com. So very easy domain names to kind of search. I know sometimes they can get complex because the internet's evolved. But thank you so much for joining us, Nekeshia, and thank you so much for everything you do for the world. and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, and thank you for what you do as well.